Hello, it's Chris here in Melbourne, Australia. We need some urgent assistance from medical professionals, pathologists, microbiologists in particular, preferably Melbourne or Australia, but around the world. We need feedback onto what this is, what this strange pathogen is, which could be a mutation of yeast along with some fungi mutations, or bacterial, actinomycetes. Could be involved. It's hard to say. Parasites. I've been involved in horticulture all my life, and I've picked up something from all the different things I've been involved in. Composts, potting mixes, wet manures, you name it, wet soils. And something's gotten into the system which is unfortunately now systemic. Anyway, we can't get help in Melbourne at the moment, my GP and myself. We can't find a specialist who's interested enough or who's willing to do the proper research needed, and the pathology labs are having trouble doing adequate inspections on it, tests on it to find it, and so this is what they're missing. All these images are mine. I learned to use a microscope at college 40 years ago. I'm not an academic, I'm not a microbiologist, but I can handle a microscope. Everything's done with standard hygiene sort of things. The coughing you hear that's the infection in the lungs. I'm always trying to clear. Anyway, I'll get through these images quickly so you can possibly help. Any feedback, just quote the number of the image up on the screen and email me, and if you have any ideas of what we might be looking at, I'd deeply appreciate it. My GP would. And I'll carry on trying to find a specialist in Melbourne who's interested. It's a very difficult case. It is life-threatening, and I won't go into all the details of symptoms, but it's pretty much like meningitis continually now, and all the rest of it, exhaustion, etc., fatigue and mental impairment stuff. Now, this is a biopsy taken on August 19, and these elements are the things that seem to be systemic. Now, what they are is still completely unrecognised, unidentified by anybody, not even talked about by any pathology we've had done. And part of the reason we think is the cell walls of these things may in fact not hold stains very well, gram stains in particular, and so we've got trouble with pathology labs saying anything's there. All we get back is normal flora. This biopsy was taken from the chest, these particular biopsies, where the skin was changing colour. You could see the demarcation of the skin colour tone changing, and 3 biopsies were taken, and 1 was given to me because I have to do this work because the labs are not getting onto it properly, and 2 were given to a lab. Now, the lab that took the other 2 biopsies, they said, this one? No, that's it there. They said there's nothing there. There's nothing abnormal at all. Now, the biopsies were taken right alongside each other, and it's hard to believe with these elements, and as much as there is of these elements, that the other biopsy, the other two biopsies next to this one, missed the elements. Now, of course, if you're a microbiologist and you want to try to tell me these are fat cells, whatever, well, just hold on and wait until you see all the other images. It's these particular elements, and you can see the single units that look almost like bacteria or spore, are everywhere. And unfortunately they're in the whole system. All these images on this video will be mainly to do with the sputum I'm coughing up over the last 2 or 3 years. And right through it are these elements, circular, with central sort of, not nucleus, but something similar perhaps, but they seem to multiply into a number of cell structures. So this is from the chest biopsy, these, and it's these elements with these rims in varied sizes, from small coming up to larger disc shapes. They're the ones that seem to be everywhere. Now we're on to sputum, from biopsy to sputum, March 20. This would seem to be the shell of a possible one of these that has matured, or perhaps this could be a separate thing. The thing about these is their incredible size differential. That is, that they seem to be produced from a very small single unit, microscopic single unit, always usually in a biofilm, which we'll see later. Very thin, extremely viscous and sticky. Hard for me to get it up. It's almost impossible. And all I can do is cough and swallow now. It's last sort of 2 years nearly now. But the size of these, there seems to be a steady progression from the sizes up until we get to some really larger forms later on, you'll see, which then break apart. And they're also, I've got some lovely images of some of these forming little cone openings. Now this is what I'm talking about. This is the big problem that I've seen, which no one is reporting on. No one's saying this is there at all. These are all wet mounts, and mostly, I don't think I've got any grams on these. So I did grams all the time, but it just wasn't showing up. But here, it's in a very fine biofilm, incredibly viscous, really viscous. And amongst the biofilm, the chains that are making up the biofilm, the microscopic elements, whether they're bacteria, whether they're spore, they are very tiny, and they seem to just simply progress. And you can see them here, the varied sizes, they held together by the biofilm, and that's all through my body. And I don't know whether this is the neurotoxic one, but it is neurotoxic. Something's hitting the brain, could be in the spinal fluid. Anyway, back to a more general shot of these things in the sputum, back in April of 20. It's a more general mass of them. If you look at these again close up, you can see the single units everywhere through here. Just the whole ocean of these elements, varied sizes. Now again, we've got these, I tend to call them green peas when I started, not particularly technical, but however these spores, let's say, is obviously a real possibility. These spore sizes of these green pea shapes are in amongst these others. Now I'm certainly open to the possibility that these are just macrophages, and any feedback, if anyone can help me at all, I've got to find a specialist who can take on any information that I'm sent as well to help us get a proper treatment, because I am in trouble. Here's again, you can see the masses of them all through here. Again, the same, they're almost like a yeast, a circular yeast. However, they vary dramatically, which we'll see later. Again, here they are. This is just sputum collected in a sterile jar and then placed onto a good slide, good cover slip, sterile procedures. Now this is interesting. Once I started seeing these, this is July 20. I haven't got them in chronological because I tried to grouping things together. Now, they seem to form sporangia type groupings or clusters, single unit, bacteria sized, but there's a progression through here again of the varied sizes coming into these larger discs. These larger elements become very fluid indeed, and here's an example of them. July 20, again this is KOH. Now again, they're not doing this here in Melbourne. No path lab will do a simple KOH test on sputum for me, because I'm not allowed to talk to them. Specialists won't order them. And it's really mind-boggling to think that such a simple worldwide known test, to try to determine, well, is there any fungi in here, a simple KOH test may bring them up. Well, sure enough, when you put KOH on, these elements are not dissolved, which is interesting. Because if I gram stain, I will hardly ever see them. Again, here's a small small colony. This is off an agar sab slope, which I cultured. This colony was smooth and pink, very yeast-like, and yet here was this amongst it. Here's the yeast cells, but this was in it too. So that's why I'm a bit concerned that I've got possibly it could be a rhodotorula mutation yeast and something else, and possibly something else again. But here you can see the different sizes. Here is one where the, let's call them spores, are emerging. Now we start to get into some really weird shapes, really fluid, yet these seem to be these. These seem to progress from single unit, slightly larger, very large. And then these break apart. But these can also seem to mature on, depending on the morphology that we're seeing. Again, I'm not in a lab. I can't do what someone should be doing, but I can do this. But there's a typical variation in the sizes. Again, another cluster of variations. Now, what I saw early on when I started coughing these up was that these, at a much smaller size than this even, they can bud. They seem to be budding prolifically, and that really worried me, but no one will listen. No one can find that. They never report yeast, pathology labs never report it. You get a yeast test done and they don't find anything. You tell them to report it on the microscope, they refuse to do it. They classify yeast as normal flora here in Melbourne. And a specialist simply will not take the interest in helping me. So at the moment, but still looking. So again, you've got this complicated sort of stuff coming up from the lungs. October 20, again, another large mass, a cluster. Again, they seem to be able to form these larger elements, which then break away. And here's some more elongated ones. Typically again, and here down the bottom, you can see the various sizes growing, possibly from the single units. And yet up the top here, you've got these more elaborate, larger sizes coming out. Again, really fluid-looking structures. Very fluid looking. Here's a mass of what I'm coughing up still. This is November 20, and I'm still coughing this up absolutely all the time, and have been for a couple of years. Now these larger elements, if someone wants to email me and say, oh yes, number 34, those larger elements, Chris, they're definitely just your, some sort of macrophage or white blood cell or whatever. That's fine. I'm happy for any help at all, clarifications, but there is some potential later on to see similar elements that I personally have observed don't seem to be that. Again, you've got the variation of these objects. This is at 1,000, and you can see the cell within the cell structure that's going on in these elements. Now, here again, you've got these almost spiraling effects of whatever this is. At some point I thought that we must be dealing with parasites, but all the antiparasitics we tried didn't clear it. And the only thing that was did have some effect was Mebendazole, which is interestingly an anti-fungal. And so that's interesting, because the first antifungal we tried, my GP gave me, was Voriconazole after we found our aspergillus as being a possibility in the sputum, reported by a lab. The Voriconazole is the only medicine I've been given that has really nearly shifted it. We had to take it up to 600 milligrams. At 100 milligrams, nothing happened for 6 weeks. But then we slowly jumped it up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in stages, and the more I took, the more I cleared from the lung, and all the symptoms began to go down. But it didn't resolve it. It stopped working, and then the symptoms just continued to worsen. Now here's another one of these elements. Now these, I say I'm open to the fact that this might be a large macrophage, and these are the arms going out. I'm happy for anyone to comment on this and just guide me, help me, so that I can have more information to take to the next specialist and say, please Bob, can you help me? Now again, if someone would like to let me know, are these simply macrophages? But if they are macrophages of any sort, or white blood cells of any sort, well, what are they collecting? Well, they're collecting the very things that are floating around in my blood, sputum, and seem to be in the flesh. So even if they were white blood cells, all of these things, then they seem to be sending out a pretty strong signal that this is an infection. And you can see the mass of it there. That's just a straight cough up from the lung. That's November 20. November 20 again. November 20 again. A nice image there of the varied sizes that are slowly growing out of this cluster. November. Now, the thing is this actually one of these smoother, younger ones here that's grown into a large smoother, which has finally lost its coating? Again, I can't be certain. It's hard for me to get all the stages together, and plus I'm in so much pain all the time, it's a bit difficult. Now, this is interesting because this is typical of, I'll just zoom in a bit there for you, but that's typical of the sort of layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, coil upon coil, that these things seem to be able to produce. They're really amazing. in one way, if they weren't poisoning me to death, it's very interesting. But again, as I say, these are the most common elements which no one knows, no one sees, no one registers, no one identifies, no one talks about. I can't see these on the internet anywhere after 3.5 years of searching, except for one place, and that's Melinda Sart in the USA, who, funnily enough, has a cluster of individuals over there who have an unknown pathogen which no pathology lab can recognise or find or identify using standard procedures, and they have the same symptoms I have. There's a really powerful connection going on there at the moment. I'm connecting with her. I've sent over 600 images of mine. I've seen some of her images, and her images were the first images I've seen on the internet, a couple of her images that were the same as some of mine. So interestingly, she's in vet microbiology, and she found the infection in dogs and people. And the other really interesting fact is that when I was 7, I was mauled by dogs, a pack of dogs, teeth marks all over the back and head. Here's another one of these loopy images, and the question is, and also some of these people had subcutaneous nodules. Well, I've got subcutaneous nodules, and and all the symptoms they have similar to mine, if not exactly the same, and unrecognised. The immune system doesn't respond in those people. Mine isn't responding either. That's why it's tricking everybody. I can understand how specialists look at these results and go, well, I can't see any evidence, but when you're in agony in their office, nearly passing out, and they still refuse to help you, you have to do things yourself, and that's why I'm doing this. I know there will be a specialist here in Melbourne, I'm certain, a researcher. We've got the Doherty Institute, all sorts of places here in Melbourne, unis, that any sort of research place or any specialist who could look at this and go, well, come in, I'm interested in this, and I can give a sample. This needs to go into a lab that's got really, really good people, advanced knowledge, and to really try to understand this. The reason it may not be coming up in gram staining is because, interestingly, Melinda Sart in the USA, she's saying that she thinks their group may be some sort of actinomycete. And now, that's a bacteria, of course, as you who are in the job know, is somewhat fungal-like in its growth habit. I haven't seen more of her images. I've only got really about half a dozen that I can say are like mine. I'm hoping she'll send me more. The ones that you can see of hers are on the net on ResearchGate. Look for her there and you'll find her on ResearchGate. Melinda Sart. And anyway, so hopefully with really proper testing done. Melinda was saying that her investigations seem to show that the cell walls of these things are not normal cell walls. In fact, they might not even have a proper cell wall, which could account for the fluidity of these things. And if in a gram staining, when you put acetone or alcohol on your 4-stage stain, I wouldn't be surprised if the alcohol or acetone's blowing these out. And then, of course, no one sees them. I haven't done that test yet because I'm in so much pain all the time. It's hard for me to do anything. But if I wasn't in so much pain, I would do further investigation. Now, again, if someone wants to email me and say, yes, Chris, that's definitely a macrophage looking for the infection, fine. Or if that's not a macrophage, but it's something else altogether, then please email. Here's this very long element here. Again, we may have more of those later, but in much bigger forms, making forms that are much larger. Again, just a general cluster of this weird thing. Now, again, if these are some sort of macrophage or white blood cell, well, they are full of the infection. So if these are my immune system, which obviously, if that's my immune system, then I'm in trouble. That one there, to me, just speaking as a gardener, is simply one of these that's matured. And you can see the different sizes there, but clearly they're forming larger elements. And the same here in this central one. They're expanding, they're growing. Now, if they're all growing from these single units, I'm in real trouble. Again, these come out of here. Again, I'm happy for anyone to say, oh, yeah, that's typical macrophage. Well, that's fine. But again, up here, I don't know if they're the long arms of a macrophage searching out for these things, or whether this whole body is just releasing some sort of other element that hasn't yet been sort of seen much. I throw in some 400 images. Most of mine are cropped for you, but just so you get some, be able to gauge the size of the others. Again, here are these larger elements, which, as I say, could be part of the immune system. I don't know. No one will speak to me, so that's why this is going on YouTube. Please give me some feedback, and any feedback will be most welcome. Believe me, I've already been criticised by some of the specialists I've seen, so I really don't need any more criticism, thanks. I must prefer some help. But if all these are coming out here, are they the arms of macrophages, or is this some sort of growth coming out of this? Anyway, move on. Again, you've got this typical strange looping. That's why I often thought these, well, maybe they're a nematode parasite that hasn't been identified yet. I've been to India and Nepal, but I've had this for quite a while. But anyway, so now, again, here's this structure. This possibly would have been quite smooth, coated, but as the coating's removed, or it's been damaged in the scope, in the slide, we can see there seems to be these concentric circles, but they're also very almost worm-like, nematode-like, or spaghetti-like. That seems to be a part of the element, part of the structure element, making up all the other things. Again, just another cluster again. Another cluster. Oh, sorry, this is a good one. This is a this is just to show how that nothing here. Now there is, and there it is coming out. So this is, I saw this moving, of course, as I had the scope on it. I quickly took a few shots to try to get the movement action. But yeah, that was moving out. So this obviously seems to be just simply maturing, growing, and then disintegrating. Travelling everywhere else in my body and brain. Again, a grouping, which does seem to be breaking apart. Same sort of situation happening there. Again, same sort of things happening. Again, here you've got a really much more developed grouping. Really, again, these real, what I call wet spaghetti loops, I call them. Very technical term for you medical people, along with green peas. There's a green pea. So these wet spaghetti loops, which could easily be a sort of a mutated yeast hypha. It's quite possible. Rototoria has been in my mind for a while. But again, you've got this sort of panhandle spaghetti looping, and with really odd shapes. I've got plenty of odd shapes. I've got tens of thousands of images, by the way. So again, over here, you've got these concentric circles, all sorts of odd things. But again, if someone says, oh, that's a macrophage there, these multiple loops are some sort of part of your immune system, well then, okay. But I'm doubtful that will happen. However, as I said, I'm a gardener. What do I know? Again, here are these clusters, and you can see that these elements are breaking away from this. This is breaking apart. Again, there's just a grouping. Now I'm coughing these up. Just the dates, if you monitor the dates, you'll see they're all, I haven't put them in chronological order. So they're all over the place. It's not like I've coughed it up once and I dropped it in the mud and then put it, which one specialist accused me of contaminating the slides. I said, how can I contaminate it? I use sterilised wire loops with flame and alcohol. I use high-grade slides, high-grade cover slips. I take it straight out of the sterile jar, put it on the scope, and then I send that jar off to the lab. These are my images that I get, and then I get back from the lab, nothing there, normal flora, nothing there, normal flora, nothing there, normal flora, nothing there, normal flora. I'll have to write a song about it. So I knew something was going wrong, and Melinda Sart could be onto something in the States where she's saying this weird thing they've got over there, this unknown pathogen, same symptoms I'm suffering from. It doesn't seem to hold well with any sort of gram staining. It needs someone who really can check this out really fully, using all the incredible techniques that are available, not just standard, ABC and then leave it at that. Again, now these discs can form into a much more granular form. Now, okay, if they're part of my immune system, fine, white blood cell of some sort, let me know. But they often are circled by the wet spaghetti loops. Here's one emerging here out of the cluster. Here's another group of what seem like slightly more granular forms, but surrounded, and undoubtedly they've either emerged from, or if this of course is a immune cell, then okay, they may be caught in the actual structure of the immune cell itself. But if so, then these are the enemy. If that was a white blood cell, it's attacking this. But if they're seeing this on gram staining, why aren't they saying, well, what's these things that the white blood cell is attacking? No one's interested. By the way, these things, I just need a 103, are these simply epithelial, young epithelial cells? I see a lot of these with this central circle. Or are they an immune cell? I'd like to know that. Here's, again, you've got this granular surrounded by these much softer elements emerging from the side. Now that can't be, I don't think, my immune system, even if all these things were various types of white blood cells. And it seems fairly clear that these are breaking apart. So even if they were any sort of immune system response, they can't hold it together anyway. So obviously it gets released back into the system. Now this is interesting. In my mind, just as a layman, a gardener person, this grows into this, which grows and matures into this. Now, if you've gram stained all that, and if all this added material is somehow destroyed through acetone or alcohol or any of the stains, saffron and the others, iodine might even be the one that does it, being disinfectant. But anyway, whatever this is, if this is removed by one of those stains, and all they're left with are these larger clusters, then it's gram stained. They put it under the scope and they go, oh yeah, okay, well that's just a normal flora. But all this is gone. Even I have great trouble seeing this with gram staining. But I'm in a lot of pain, and I'm not a microbiologist. My gram staining is very ordinary, to say the least, in the sense of it's not precise and clear and refined, but I can see the elements even when I gram stain at times. But I notice there's a massive reduction. All these have disappeared. But I need to, if I can get well enough, I'm going to try to see if I can test these with putting drops of, put them under a slide, get lots of these, then put a drop of alcohol on, see if anything happens, put a drop of iodine on, see if these walls disintegrate. But I'm so ill, I thought that was the job of the specialist. Here again is just a typical of what I'm coughing up. Oh, a bit of flaring there. Now that's just coming straight out of the lung. And I am very ill. Now, I haven't seen anything like this on the internet, on sputum slides. And the problem with something new is, of course, I understand. Everyone goes, well, that can't be there because we haven't seen it. Hello. I am the empirical evidence standing in front of you, and it's right through my body. Cut me open and you'll find it. Interestingly, when they do a bronchoscopy, which I've had 3 done, 2 cultured nothing, 1 found 2 fungi. I think it was Phythorella, I can't remember which one. Phythorella candeliana and Aspergillus fumigatus. But they've also found Penicillium, Acremonium, Exophyala spinifera, and Rhizopus. But a blood done by a private lab found Leptosphaeria maculans, which they said, although it seemed odd, they told me you can be certain you've got fungi in your blood though, even if that was a DNA PCR. But I've had to go to try find private help. Individual, just really, I'm not getting the help I should be from yet at the moment. We live in hope. Again, just a cluster of elements. Perhaps they're just all part of my immune system. Again, any feedback would be welcome. Smaller grouping of of these disc-like objects. Here's a mass. You can see what I call the wet spaghetti loops all through here. They're possibly hypha, some sort of structural hypha, possibly from yeast or something, I don't know. But Rhizopus is in my mind, but it may not be. Now, whether this is normal flora or whether this is part of the infection too, again, don't know. Could be just normal bacteria here from the sputum, but again, you've got this odd shaped. Now, this also inside these smoother green covering shapes, you're starting to develop lines, I've noticed every now and then, which seems to bring it back to that they are coming from single units and building up. That may well just be an immune cell working, but in it, you can still see in it the larger elements along with all the granular, or is that part of the infection? Because I've got objects of things exactly like that just busting apart. Here we are again, and again surrounded by the spaghetti. It may just be wet spaghetti, wet loopy spaghetti. Here we go. Now here's one of the earlier solid ones. You could probably imagine that that is in fact that, except it's matured, and sure enough what's coming out? The green piece, or more technically, possibly the spores, or possibly a weird bacteria. Unknown perhaps. What's amazed me is the way I've been treated as if we know everything, there's nothing else to find. Well, I've been in nature study all my life, and I know that we have hardly found anything. Anyway, now these groupings, again, are they then possibly this? Now, if this is the one part of the infection, one aspect of the infections that I may have, then are these all the infection too? Or are these all the immune system? In which case, what are these? They must be the enemy then, if they're the white blood cells, but these are also everywhere, in the blood, in the sputum, you name it. Yeah. So again, I think a bit of just simple logic might be helpful to at least investigate. Again, odd shapes in the sputum. Sputum again, now here's one with discs. Again, these could easily be normal flora elements, which I'm unaware of. I'm not a microbiologist, as I say, but any help would be most beneficial. Now, whatever these are, there's an ocean of them on March the 7th, 20. But again here, they're breaking apart, coming apart. Now, if these are all the infection, then no wonder I don't feel too good. Again, another small disc. Again, another one. And again, you've got these softer looking elements surrounding the granular ones. And here's another, well, that's the first one. That's my introduction image, yeah. But it is a beautiful image. This is exactly what I mean by these looping wet spaghettis. A lot of the images I had looked exactly like nematodes curling, almost like a question mark. It wasn't until I saw them moving on the slide and they'd unroll and loop and unroll back that I realised they were loops of hypha or whatever, and as they moved, their whole shape would shift and change. And then I thought, well, they must be parasites. So then we tried antiparasitics, biltricide. We tried most of them, but only Mebendazole had an impact. But it didn't clear it, and it's interesting that Mebendazole is, of course, was originally, I think, developed as an anti-fungal. Now, that's just typical of what I'm coughing up every day, and I can't see this anywhere on the internet. So you're welcome to share these with anybody. In fact, I pray that you will. I have a spiritual faith, and I've been brought up in the faith, and I assure you that is one of the only things that's kept me going. Yeah, I've got some good support as well, but from my sister Joan and others. But I'm really I'm not alone, because spiritual is you're not alone, but but you are solitary in the physical sense. And now this was interesting because this came up in September 18. Now this is how long I've been coughing this stuff up and how sick I am every single day, trying to fight to get somebody, please have a look at this. Now, this was after 3 months of Voriconazole. We took it in June. Brilliant vocational doctor here in Melbourne, one of the best in Australia. Once we got the first aspergillus report back from sputum, after that took 6 months, because this may not be aspergillus, of course, but they found aspergillus. That was enough of a reason for him to try an antifungal. Now, it did nothing at 100 milligrams, but then at 2, 3, 4, 5, it started coming up. 6, and I was really, my whole life was changing. I was getting my life back, as you often say in these illness type situations, but then it stopped working. Well, now this is just prior to stopping, September 18th. We had to stop October the 1st because liver markers were up. Plus, this had started to slow down by September about About September 24th, I could feel it was no longer working at high levels, and I knew it wouldn't sustain it. It wouldn't break through, and sure enough, it stopped working. But these came up. Now, my own personal view on this is that I could feel it going deeper and deeper and deeper into the infection, a bit like peeling back an onion, going deeper and deeper. I was coughing up deeper and deeper from the lungs, and then finally these came up. Of course, there's also the aspect with these antifungals, as you people would know in the business, that mutations can come about through treating fungi with certain medicines. So whether the Voriconazole possibly caused the mutation, I don't know, but it was the only thing that helped, and that's the only thing that came close to clearing it. And I remember telling that to one specialist I saw, and he immediately retorted to me, that was a placebo, placebo effect. I was in agony, nearly passing out in his office. I didn't bother to say to him, will you please ring my doctor to confirm this, because he wouldn't listen to anything I said. So even when I give them this information, they throw it back in my face. Not everybody, but some do. Now, again, here's this loopy situation, or cell within cell, structure within structure. Whether they're, anyway, you microbiologists would know more about this than I would, but that's what I'm coughing up. These are, as I say, wet mouse. Here's another beautiful shot of this particular pathogen, whatever it is. Very small units, but also these larger ones. And just down here, you can see one, it's either attracted to it, but I've got lots of images of one or two or three equally distanced and budding out. So they do bud, these. So that you would think, someone might go, well, let's try some intravenous antifungals for you, since you've tried all the oral antifungals, which we did eventually try, but they all failed. Voriconazole was the first and the best, and all the others were less. Here's another typical grouping. Now, I've got some beautiful shots of these, which are more mature or hardened into yellow discs, golden yellow, with the same sort of spout opening. And I've got some beautiful images from one that I actually found in a stool sample where I've got video of them just popping out. different size and shape, but same sort of principle. But I've also got one of these further on that's turned golden. I gather this is just a younger one of the older one you'll see later. Again, variations on a theme there. Now here's the wet spaghetti look. I as a gardener, I'd say, oh, that's a nematode. That's got to be some sort of nematode. But they're not. There's no motility. I've never seen any of these wet spaghettis move at all. Now, they're either the sloths of the nematode world, and they don't move, which is possible. We don't know everything. It's not our Earth, we didn't make it. So, but here is the structures. Now, this most likely, I gather, was completely smooth. Then, inside the structure, these filamentous, and that's where Melinda Sant in the USA, she's talking about actinomycetes. She's wondering if it's not involved in her cluster over there. It's certainly, I've got some images now with these elements certainly associated with this much smoother. Here we are, here's another one, a bit better to see. Obviously growing in, and she's talking about, did I have any images of crystalline things, elements? She's much more qualified than I am, so I'll use simple words, but these crystalline structures. And these are the only ones I can say that, but these tend to be looking more like bacterial. We can see them here again. Now these are disintegrating, what's left of some mass that's disintegrated. Again, a conglomerate of various, possibly just a different bacteria in the sputum clumping, but again, you can see the beginnings of these here. And the single elements, I'm seeing these little single units just right everywhere. And when I think each one of those can grow into one of those large discs, that's a bit of a worry. Now, again, are these all macrophages? Or are they in fact part of some infection? In amongst them are the elements that seem to be the infection or part of the infection. Again, is this just a classic macrophage photo I've taken? They should have a little label there, I am a macrophage, if that's the case. Again, more elements, just different shapes. Again, I throw in a few 400s every now and then, just so people can get the idea of what you're looking at in the crops. In the crops you'll be seeing things like these elements here of varied sizes, along with much of these voluminous sort of fluid, almost plasma-like ones. In fact, Mebendazole again talks about a plasma-like thing as well. I've only just connected to her by the grace of God, and she's been very, very supportive, and it's wonderful to have her support, unlike some others, I may say. So here, again, you've got a mass amount of stuff here, and all various sizes. Again, a small cluster, again, various cluster, again, variation on a theme, variation on a theme again. Now these gold discs also start appearing from time to time. Sometimes just by themselves individually, one or two or three. Now I don't know whether it's the smooth green disc, light green, maturing into gold discs. I thought these might be vacuoles, but then eventually I think they are in fact some sort of reproduction of what it may be, let's say spores. But I've got some images of those to follow. Again, that's just a 400 image to get some gauge of what you're looking at with all the other images. There's a nice small cluster there. These seem to often come from quite a thickened, almost bacterial colony. Here's a nice one again. These are all just straight out of the lung into a sanitised jar, sterilised jar, straight on the slide, all new slides, etc., etc. But that slight shading is the biofilm, and that's another big worry for me. It's just so viscous. I've tried hundreds of things to break it down, natural things, because of course I'm yet to find anyone really interested. But here we can see the tiny size of all these particles, and the obviously the ease of reproduction this thing's got has really got me on the back foot. Over here we can see one here which is developing these lines under the smooth coating. Just another huge conglomerate of things. These are really odd. Now this is in brain heart infusion broth, and so let go in the broth, obviously its shape can alter dramatically or can grow in a different way. And I try to experiment as much as I can. Instead I just get a packet of Cocoa Pops from the specialist and the path labs. So anyway, I'll battle on. But I would appreciate any help. Again, in brain heart infusion, they really take on different shapes again. Now back into just sputum wet mounts. I started to different times of the year, different years. Every day I'm attacking it. Every day I'm affected by it. That's literally it's been my whole life for the past 3.5 years. Every day is just this, attacking it, trying to find something new. And so these are some of the elements. Again, sorry about the colouring, chopping and changing the tones. I've got a tube view, I think it is, and I'm in a lot of pain when I do these things, and sometimes I don't adjust I try to get the colour in some sort of constant, but this is a little bit too overtoned. But here you've got more solid masses forming, growing into a more solid mass, but also disintegrating into these elements here. Yeah, it's really, and now it's these more sort of, well, there's the mass there, so it's certainly forming a coating, like calcium top coating or some sort of coating, whatever it may be. But again, just massive variation on sizes. Now this is where we start moving towards some more interesting images soon, which look really like tortoiseshell cysts, which could be parasitic or fungal or whatever. But again, you've got this mass that's beginning to really thicken up, and this stuff is so tough to get up. I always picture it like araldite stuck inside the bronchioles. It's not your normal mucus, globular mucus. It's not like that. It dramatically changed after the Voriconazole. I was coughing up lumps of things, then that all stopped. But around the edges again, you've got these interesting softer elements. Again, just a mass of these more granular with these sort of softer large elements. Here are what I call the sort of more gold discs, but I feel they are possibly the green ones moving into gold. But just to throw another something else into the ring, we'll soon be seeing some things where the gold ones could be coming from. These green ones, the green peas as I call them, or spores, they do seem to be involved in these thicker, almost bacterial. They're almost like tetrads, in fact. In fact, for quite a while when I started seeing these things very early on, I was looking at diploids and tetrads all the time, and I thought, but then I'd see these things around, and I couldn't figure out if the diploids and tetrads were then progressing onto the circular form. I couldn't get the link clearly. But anyway, I could be dealing with 2 or 3 different things, I'm afraid. Now, in these, there seems to be certain elements, and then the whole thing begins breaking apart. This is one that's breaking apart. Here's one with clusters of these cyst-like, or they could be sporangia. You see, this is the thing. I'm uncertain. But clearly they seem to be harbouring, or they could be parasite eggs. The options are wide open. I've been in horticulture for over 40 years, so it could be anything. Now, this is really a lovely shot in that you can clearly see the emerging inner substances. That may be an attractive force to this thing, but they're not. There they are, breaking apart. So that's not the same one, by the way. That's the one there. That's a different one. So May 2021, same day, same sample. But there's some others of these. Let's call them cysts or sporangia or something in that category, and inevitably they are in fact breaking apart. Again, a big cluster of this more sort of thicker grouping, but you've got these sort of almost plasma-like things. Now, I do know that these sort of can form on just often common normal flora, but it's heavily associated with something that's unusual, and I'm very ill, so you've got to think outside the box. Now, these golden discs started appearing in a real brownier, granular or structure or conglomerate, and I'll show you where they're all coming from in a moment. Or they seem to be, but as I say, the gold discs and the small green peas, they could be the one and the same thing, maturing, not sure. So the green could age into gold, or it may just be that day I've coughed up something that's whatever, I don't know, a bit different. But there certainly seems to be some difference between these golder discs than the softer greens. But as I say, they could be that could just mature into that. I don't know. But there's a grouping. Now this here, I've cultured rhizopus from my sputum many times, many times. I'm at home, but I culture it, and I've got incubators here, and I always leave a control plate out on the desk where I do it, and sure enough, I'll get an odd penicillium or something that's floating around from the garden that's coming through the